What's going on, everyone? So today I am jumping back in and doing an updated tier list for the leaders from set 1 and set 2. Now, mind you, we are coming off one of the most dominant performances from any leader in any version of Star Wars Unlimited yet. So keep that in mind. But we're rating the leaders themselves today. So yes, there's going to be some decks that are specifically good with whatever leader, maybe because that leader helps just make that deck function, or maybe because there's not really a better option. That doesn't really determine where they're placed on this tier list today. We're looking at the leaders, what they provide, and how they work within the decks that are very strong. Are they capable of pulling multiple different archetypes or multiple different bases alongside it, multiple different options in terms of styles, etc.? Again, we're focusing in on the leaders themselves. Now, before I talk about the tiers, I just want to give you a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you for supporting the channel. And also, I have a TCG player link in the description down below. Be sure to use it for all of your cards. Let's talk about the tiers today. So starting us off with S tier, what does this tier represent? These are the leaders, potentially, that are exceptionally powerful, and they spawn multiple different decks around them using various different strategies because their center point allows you to do so. Either they flip extremely early with absurd stats. What? Is that Boba I'm hearing about? Or they just have a guaranteed ability that is just super powerful that allows you to kind of function no matter what and get a ton of value. The reason why these lists are so strong is because of the leaders, not necessarily because of the cards alongside them necessarily. A tier decks, these are lists that are super well put together. These have leaders that synergize extremely well with what they're trying to do, or potentially they have a really nice game plan where their leader fits in quite well. Their ability is pretty strong, or maybe they just come down with the right aspects that allows you to really make your deck function. These are extremely powerful leaders, potentially spawning multiple deck archetypes, but not necessarily. Maybe they just have one particular archetype within their kind of wheelhouse that allows them to be up so high on the tier list. B tier leaders, this is where we start to get into the point where would you consider a different leader that might fill their role slightly better? These are maybe slightly different directions that you can go for certain decks that might be an A or S tier, or potentially just different ways to spin. There are specific aspects that maybe another leader does slightly different. They're still solid. These leaders can definitely have a few options to them, but just not necessarily competitive archetypes or competitive leaders in terms of going to your planetary qualifier, but definitely can pull up to a store showdown and pull out a win. C tier, this is where I start to really question whether or not this leader should ever be played. There might be a specific niche circumstance where this leader works specifically with this card, and that's why I'm using it. But oftentimes C tier leaders, they just are maybe missing something to make their entire ability function. Maybe they just deploy for too high of a cost. Maybe they just have far better options, which is usually the case when you enter into C tier. Or maybe they're just looking for new cards, new sets in the future to really complete their ability, their archetype that they're trying to spawn. Lastly, D tier leaders. There's not many of them that are going to enter into D tier, but these are ones that I would recommend just never playing. Either their abilities are so niche that they really don't have anything going for them, they don't really function all that well, or they never come into play, they flip way too late in the game, or a combination of both. Their aspects just have way better options, etc. There's just so many different ways. There's just going to be way too many better leaders on the list on average to even consider these ones in D tier. With all that said, let's dive into our first one on the list in Gar Saxon. So Gar Saxon is the first one up. By the way, I decided to use the normal arts because I had a lot of feedback saying that you all prefer that. So that's what we're doing. And I'll probably drop them into the B tier just to get us started before I truly place them. And we may modify as we go deeper, kind of comparing to other leaders as we go through. Gar Saxon's definitely a unique one because you get this static bonus for all these random upgrades that you might be playing. The decks that I've really found him to be good in are decks that play units that are naturally upgraded or naturally have some sort of upgrade synergy, where you don't have to go out of your way to play some sort of upgrade to make them better alongside Gar Saxon's ability. As such, something like a Gar Saxon Yellow has been extremely powerful for me, simply because you can play things like 7th Fleet Defender and just have an extra power, which turns him sort of into an aggro deck. The downside to this is that his flip side, as well as his late flip cost, as well as his aspects in his identity, don't really match all that well with that game plan, right? Playing your Dr. Evazons and your Crafty Smugglers as slightly more aggressive little value units in the early game don't really mesh well with the other things that he's got going. As such, he ends up somewhere around the B tier. I would probably lean towards the later stages of B tier, a little bit lower, and I wouldn't recommend trying like Gar Saxon Green or double blue Gar Saxon. There is ways to win for sure, but the actual attempt to get use out of his ability and his overall leader really needs to be played with something that naturally has upgrades in order to realistically and reliably get that bonus on your attacks and on your trades and on a regular basis. Qira's been one of those leaders that a lot of people slept on very, very early on in set 2. It's one of the leaders I rated pretty high on my list. It's because of a static, strong ability. Giving a shield token for 1 resource for 2 damage on a unit ends up being extremely valuable because your unit can kind of trade or get a kill without dying for the cost of 1 resource and 2 damage onto that unit. But it's not just that. Her flip being sort of like this event effect where you're dealing a bunch of damage to all the things on board can really put her in a nice position. And I'm actually going to drop her into the A tier. There is conversation to put her in the S tier, but to me the S tier is only a couple of decks that really do some major work. There's really only one option to play Qira at the current moment to get a lot of that value and to get later on in the games where you can leverage all of the Qira abilities early and have that later game, and then it's Qira Green. So she doesn't have that much diversity. That one Qira Green list, however, ends up being an extremely powerful soft control list, and it's one of the top decks in the format as of right now. So she's definitely a very powerful leader. She just doesn't have that much versatility yet. I could definitely see her in future sets getting more and more valuable because just paying 1 resource for a shield token ends up being a pretty powerful ability. Next up, we've got Finn. Oh man, I know. I had some fun with Finn, guys. I've done a couple of videos on Finn. I've had a bunch of people want me to play Finn, so I've actually played a lot of this guy. He's got a really, really awkward ability in that you're trying to defeat your own upgrades to get some extra value, but that extra value ends up oftentimes being less than the upgrade that you had to defeat. By getting that shield token, you kind of defeat the purpose of having the upgrade in the first place, and then he kind of comes in as just an average, decently statted actually leader on 5, but it's just not good enough to kind of make up for the things that you're missing. I think that's the real big problem with Finn, is that his ability isn't absolutely garbage. As I've said, I've played a lot of Finn, lots of Finn Green, and there's a lot of synergy you can do with the upgrade, chaining into more upgrades and getting some value there, especially with something like Rose Tico. The problem with it is you just have so many other heroism vigilance options, or just heroism something plus vigilance base, that you really don't want to be using Finn, and I'm gonna have to drop him into the C tier for that reason. There's some really powerful synergies you can do with him. I think the 2 that I really like are Maz Kanata and Rose Tico, but both of those are kind of fringe. Maz Kanata's case oftentimes just dies, and it does take a decent amount of setup in the right matchup to even function. And then in Rose Tico's case, you need to continuously attack, which completely gets negated by a whole portion of the archetype in soft control and hard control decks that just don't let you do that. So lots of better options. Not really that many options with Finn. Only a couple of niche synergies that make him decent. So I'm going to go into the C tier for me. Next one up we've got is another heroism vigilance leader in Rey. Now, Rey is someone who has been really impressive for me. Now, unlike Qira, where I put Qira in the S tier, initially I think I put Rey somewhere in the B or C tier when I first did my set 2 tier list, but she has been a lot better than I would have initially given her credit for. Rey's ability to give an experience token, anything with power 2 or less, just puts her on the board as an extremely powerful leader with all these random off cards that you might not have thought of to be quite powerful, but if you give them an experience token, suddenly they're amazing plays on whatever turn it is. Take R2D2 becoming a 2/5 on turn 1. That's kind of obnoxious, and Rey makes that happen. Alongside the Restore 3, she becomes a pretty powerful soft control list. I'm going to put her up in the A tier with Qira. There's a lot of lists, even some in the recent PQ tournaments that did well, and even one that actually made a top 8. So there is some competitive viability for some of her lists, but also she just has options for multiple different aspects alongside her. Double blue Rey, Rey red, Rey green, even Rey yellow has done decently. So you have a lot of synergy just because of that action. And well, she actually does have a lot of potential going forward because all you're limited by is low powered units, which can be made up for with things like raid and grit and all the other things that happen with Rey's units already. Hondo Ohnaka is the next one on the list, and Hondo is someone who has warmed up a little bit. Initially, I think I put him down in the C tier where his use of smuggle is pretty few and far between. But the thing that's really made him shine is the ability to leverage that use of smuggle and get some extra value by essentially drawing a bunch of additional cards in your soft control, hard control lists. And what I mean by that is you're playing this controlling list, but you have so many different options of actually trading or getting some units down early or getting some powerful sentinels out because of all the things that you can smuggle out. And because you're smuggling them out, you're actually getting a bunch of experience to make those units something that maybe outvalues your opponent's units or maybe just trades. And because of those extra options, you really have a lot of leeway in your games to do a lot of different things. I've tried various other variations where you're playing like Hondo yellow, Hondo red. None of them really come all that close. So while I said I put him in the C tier last time, I'm still going to put him in the C tier because what makes him powerful really isn't the leader effect. Like if I were to drop any other variation, I'm really unimpressed with Hondo simply because smuggle is too expensive. There's one variation that's Hondo blue that I do like. That's mainly because villainy vigilance ends up just being such a powerful aspect combination that Hondo's really boosted up a lot because of it. Not to say that Hondo's this weak leader, but in that combination specifically where you are able to back up these smuggle cards that are almost unplayable in every other deck, like Collection Starhopper, you have a specific niche synergy with Hondo, and that gives them a little bit of extra value. Jabba the Hutt's up next, and with Jabba, I have been a little bit disappointed. I think the biggest thing that holds Jabba back is the action economy and the way Star Wars Unlimited works overall. But this idea of putting a bounty on something, trying to claim it, and then getting a resource cost reduction on something that you're playing just doesn't really happen all that frequently. The more powerful thing to be doing with Jabba is to guarantee bounties on your opponent's units to allow specific synergies to happen. And that is pretty powerful. If there was some way to allow this one cost reduction to apply to anything else but units, I could see Jabba being a lot more powerful in a vigilance villainy control shell. However, because it's only applied to units, you both need to play a unit in order to get the ability to trade with something, then also go ahead and have another unit and put the bounty on before your opponent plays anything. And all of that is a really hard thing to set up, especially since you are almost never going to have the initiative because of you forcing yourself to put bounties on opponents' units. All that said, there are some powerful synergies, and I'm going to put it at the top B tier for right now. You have really cool things like Reputable Hunter, a turn 1 3/4, which is really powerful. Turn 2 4/3 shielded, things like that just really are quite nice in Jabba's deck. Next we're going to talk about is Boba Fett, new Boba Fett that is, and he has been really underwhelming, to be honest. I was really impressed with some early variations of some set 2 lists with Boba Fett. Granted, they all seemingly got dwarfed by Sabine Green simply for the fact that you cannot run ECL with Boba Fett and still play that heroism aggro to get use of all the keywords that Boba Fett's trying to look out for. The problem that Boba Fett suffers from is not necessarily that he's a weak leader by any means. He's pretty average. But as I was saying earlier with the tiers, in B tier, there's going to be a couple of leaders that you might want to consider something just a little bit more consistent, a little bit better. And in this case, well, that is Boba Fett, where you have a lot of just better options if you're trying to go with that red-green heroism aggro. I would even consider Leia in that category, but you got Han Solo, you've got, Sabine, as I mentioned earlier, and that really harms Boba Fett. However, his overall premise of using these keywords to pump out some very valuable points of damage is pretty decent, and I could definitely see him working more generally with a lot of different things than potentially some other leaders, because all he cares about are those keywords. So I'm going to put him in the B tier, not better than Jabba, but slightly better than Gar Saxon, kind of in that middle of the road B tier leader. Next one, I am going to be so sad to put him in the D tier, but he's going to go straight into the D tier, guys. Hunter has been someone that I really just hoped worked every single time. I just love the kind of overall Clone Wars story, and seeing the ending of the Clone Wars is really cool. So I love Hunter as like a character and kind of what they all went through, but he just hasn't done anything. He's way too expensive to flip. 7 to flip leaders have to be extremely powerful. 7 to 8 flip leaders have to do something game changing when they come down. And what does Hunter do? He's a 5/8 overwhelm. That's all he does. And then he has this on attack trigger that might draw you a card. That is about it. But the way you're drawing a card is so convoluted that you basically can't even draw a card most of the time. And then his front side action costs you 1 resource to draw a card, but you again have to go through all the shenanigans that you do have to do on the back to even get that card in your hand. He just doesn't do anything. Add to the fact that he, guess what, is in the same aspects as something like Boba Fett, where you have so many different other options that are better, and you necessarily can't use ECL. I mean, you could, but it puts you in a double green deck, which is a little bit weaker because you have better options in villainy. I would just never play Hunter, and I don't recommend anyone play Hunter. In fact, I don't think I've really seen anyone play Hunter except for one person that I keep running into on Carebest that's trying to make Hunter work, and it never, ever works. This is a leader where, again, D tier leaders, these are leaders that I genuinely think you will struggle a lot to play and actually have a win against most decks. Not just that, oh, I'm going to have slightly less win percentage if I go with Jabba, and it will end up mattering in the long run, but that you will just feel bad when you play Hunter. That's what it feels like. Now let's get out of the D tier and jump up into the A tier with Bossk. Bossk has been pretty impressive. He's also got a couple different archetypes to his name in Bossk Blue and Bossk Green, both of which have been pretty impressive and actually done well in some tournaments. Now, Bossk Blue, the hard control variant, is definitely the more popular one in terms of competitive viability. People are trying to make that work a lot more often. But Bossk Green is very comparable in terms of competitive viability. The options that you have with Bossk just get a lot better because he comes down super early. He allows the hard control decks to function. The ability to do 1 damage to something with a bounty kind of gives you an inbuilt removal option on your leader's action in the front side for those hard control decks. But then the Bossk Green decks use those bounties, and mainly the flip side of Bossk, to double claim bounties and get some absurd value going to where you actually just cannot compete with how much Bossk is doing. So overall, it's been a pretty solid universal leader where just having bounties is going to be super powerful in different ways that you want to go, different archetypes, I should say. He's one that I don't necessarily think is going to get a lot better going for future sets. So I don't know if universal was the correct word earlier, because he does only really function with bounties. And, well, we don't know if there's going to be bounties in future sets. So we will have to see. But for right now, I would say a solid A tier leader. Next one up, we've got Kylo Ren. And this is one that I've found to be extremely fun. I got my, I guess you could say, kick of Kylo Ren way early on into set 2. That's what I wanted to do the most, is just beat people down on turn 3 and see what I can do. It was a lot of fun, but at the end of the day, it is not all that powerful, especially the way the meta has developed with things like Bossk Blue, Qira Green, Rey Reds, those types of things. Just Kylo Ren really struggles against a ton of restore because you kind of have this 2 to 3 turn window where you have to do a ton of damage because you don't have an insane amount of reach to finish out the game. His ability to discard cards to give you extra damage is also a little bit risky, especially when your opponent has the choice to remove different units like Takedown, Fell the Dragon, things like that. You kind of have wasted an action, wasted a card in your hand, and did not get in the damage if you had the option to actually attack with that initially. So it can be a little bit risky, and for that reason, I'm going to put him in the B tier. I'm going to put him at the low end of B tier, probably behind Gar Saxon because he's much less consistent. He can pull out some of the most absurd damage swinging plays in the entire game, where you're suddenly dying literally on turn 3 when Kylo Ren comes down. But also, he can also have the opposite effect where you play a bunch of things like against Bossk Blue, you play your Greedo or you play your Death Star Stormtrooper and your, oh my gosh, I forgot the name, Benthic 2 Tubes, and suddenly Bossk puts a bounty on your Death Star Stormtrooper, kills it on turn 1, draws 2 cards, and you're like, I think I just lost on turn 1. So keep that in mind. Next we got is Bo-Katan. This is one of my favorite pet leaders. And what I mean by pet leaders is just one that I oftentimes come back to as one of my fun leaders to play. She's been pretty solid. I think the one thing that's really holding her back is the absent Mandalorians that she requires in order to consistently do some amazing things. I oftentimes play Bo-Katan Blue. It's the one that has the most Mandalorians available to you on curve, and that can be pretty strong. Her ability to deal 1 damage to something is very, very solid. We've seen it with Bossk, and we see it with Bo-Katan. This 1 damage, 1 ping to something ends up just really helping you out throughout the game, getting rid of a shield, taking care of that last point of damage, whatever. But she also comes down and kind of acts as a pretty nice removal leader, where she comes down, attacks, gets in a couple different points of damage, and attacks something else, and she really cleans up the board. Overall, she's been decent, not amazing, but I definitely would put her above Kylo Ren, probably around the Gar Saxon range. Whether she's above or below Gar Saxon, I think, is up to what you've experienced, but Bo-Katan kind of in that B tier category. Next one up, we've got to talk about New Han. So we've gone through a lot of the lists, and we might notice that the S tier is very empty right now. Well, I will have to say New Han is definitely an S tier leader for me. We've seen all sorts of variations for Han. We've seen New Han Green, we've seen New Han Blue, both of which had multiple top 8s in the recent PQ, but also just multiple different tournaments that they actually perform well. We've also seen double red Han. The only one we haven't really seen is Han Yellow, New Han Yellow, which is oftentimes the weakest variation of this, but can still be pretty solid. And the main reason for that is the front side action for Han Solo. His flip side coming down on 5 resources can be relevant in some games and sometimes just whatever. 3/6 body, not that great, but the ability to play any unit from your hand for 1 resource cheaper, albeit doing 2 damage to it, is an extremely worthwhile trade-off, while also being an extremely powerful thing to do to curve out in any game you are playing. It is extremely powerful, and I expect New Han to continuously be an S tier leader for future sets until something wild happens, because of how powerful his action tends to be. So if you're looking to kind of pull together a random list and you're like, man, what should I make my leader? Well, if you happen to be in heroism and you happen to be in aggression, I would just make New Han your leader, because chances are he's going to be the best option and oftentimes outpaces multiple other leaders in the game. He is extremely powerful, and it's one of the reasons why people tend to steer away from Han, because he's just kind of this naturally universally good leader, whereas some other ones have specific synergies that people are looking for. And next up, we've got Cad Bane, which has been going on a little bit of a tear recently. Granted, it did not do particularly well in the planetary qualifiers. However, it has still been a quite impressive leader from set 2, and it's actually going to join the ranks of the other 3 that we have in the A tier. It's had a couple different archetypes, Cad Red, Cad Blue, Cad Green, that have done pretty well, but mainly the strength of this has really come from the ability to kind of control the board while delivering the damage where you want to. I talked about how Bo-Katan and Bossk 1 damage to a unit is very strong. Turns out that 1 damage, even if you can't choose where it goes, is still pretty strong, especially if you can choose where it goes and you can get it every single turn. And even when you can't, well, you might just be able to go ahead and get 2 damage when Cad Bane flips. On top of that, having an 8 toughness flipped leader ends up being pretty obnoxious. I've noticed that that extra point of toughness does come into play quite more often than I would hope. However, the one thing that's really holding him back is the fact that he ends up in the exact same aspects as a very, very powerful leader that we've seen numerous times. He might even be a little bit stronger if he was running that same, shell that, well, I assume you all know Boba Fett is running and ends up doing pretty similar things. It's just a matter of, hey, Cad Bane, you're solid, you're just not the best. Next one is Dr. Aphra. Now, this one has gotten a little bit better because of its specific counter to the hard control decks. Of all the hard control decks, Dr. Aphra is the best at dealing with other hard control decks because of the way you end up building out Dr. Aphra. Her ability is pretty bad. Her flip is also pretty bad. 5 resource 2/5, which it often ends up being, or like a 7 resource 5/5 is still not that great. The trick with Dr. Aphra is that this discard synergy is trying to allow you to make your deck smaller in order to specifically target specific cards in order to take out your opponent later on in the game. The problem is, in order to get to the point where your deck is so small that you know what you're drawing is past the point when aggro would have beaten you anyways, so it's not really a relevant thing. You oftentimes will have won the game a different way, and that's where most of the meta is, or mid-range decks, etc. It's really only against hard control decks where this plan starts to come into action. If in the future we have some way to synergize with this discard effect, maybe Aphra will be better, but for right now, it's such a specific niche archetype, this anti-hard control deck, then I'm going to put her into C tier. I feel like every single time I talk about this next leader, someone in the comments is like, this is so underrated. Why are you not putting Fennec Shand higher up on the list? Whether it's the deck tier list, leader tier list, whatnot. Out of any leader here, this is the one that people talk about the most. And yet, I still will be putting her down into C tier, arguably even D tier. But Fennec Shand's ability to use this ambush effect for 1 additional resource, play something extremely cheap, is just not that relevant 90% of the time. And if it is relevant, you're at a point where the game is probably already spiraling out of your control. On top of that, her 5 to flip 4/4, even if she's a saboteur, is just such a poor stat line, especially considering you have a lot of 4 resources, X5s, or 4/5s or 4/6s that just completely kind of ruin her overall game plan. There are some cool things you can do with Fennec, don't get me wrong, but this combination of being in heroism cunning alongside forcing you to pay extra resources to get the ambush, only being in the early game, all of those restrictions, all the aspects, all that combination, her being a weak to flip leader, ends up putting her into the C tier. Oh boy, this next one is, I know, something that someone is going to complain about. Similar to Fennec. Lando is one of those decks alongside Fennec. Not quite as prominent as Fennec when people disagree, but still some people disagree. I think Lando is pretty bad as a leader, to be fair, but there are some cool things you can do with him. For example, you can play double yellow Lando, and it works a lot better than Fennec because you can use that smuggle ability from the resources, getting that 2 cost reduction, And despite you having to defeat a resource, that double cunning aspect of trying to get things down super early and rush down your opponent ends up reinforcing that strategy, and you can do some cool things. That said, I do not think this is a very strong leader at all, and I would definitely not recommend you be playing Lando in basically any circumstance. He's definitely going to be in the C tier. I think there's two things that really make me unfortunately sad about Lando. One is not enough smuggle cards. Something like his Millennium Falcon works amazingly in that deck and can do some major work. The problem with it is the fact that Lando doesn't have enough of those to make that play extremely consistent. On top of that, well, you're not going to have that many more smuggle cards in the future, most likely. So it is something to keep in mind. But that closes off our set 2 leaders, and we're going to dive into some set 1 leaders, starting us off with Director Krennic. This is the one that I've been, well, pretty high on as of late. I think I've never put him below the B tier, and that's going to continue today. But in fact, I'm actually going to drop him up into the A tier. This has just been a leader that has been really impressive. This 1 extra power, if you have any damage unit, comes up super regularly. Not only that, but he flips so early into the game with Restore 2 that it's really obnoxious to take him down early. And he's arguably in one of the most powerful aspect combinations in the game, which is Vigilance Villainy. This specific aspect combination just has so many different tools available to it, alongside Krennic and a lot of things that came in with set 2. Well, Krennic just ends up being pretty powerful. I'm actually going to drop him kind of in the mid to lower part of the A tier, but it's been really interesting to see Krennic do some massive work. Again, his early flip with Restore 2, I can't tell you how powerful Restore is on a leader, because these things just really mess up your entire game plan. The fact that he come down and are guaranteed to heal you a little bit. Talking about guaranteeing you some heals, we've got Iden. Now, Iden and Krennic fill very similar roles, but I've been a little bit less impressed with Iden than I have with Director Krennic. Now, Iden was the quintessential option in set 1, but from what I remember, and this has been a while, so someone can correct me if they are reaching this part of the video, Iden actually had overall a little bit less of a powerful performance compared to Krennic overall at the later end of set 1, and that was mainly because Iden is very straightforward. Her ability to heal when you defeat units doesn't really do anything if you're just going ahead and trading, because it doesn't really fulfill what you're looking to do. Like, you're not getting too much value from that, because your leader on the flip side is a 4/4 shielded 6 resource flip, which doesn't do a whole lot. Whereas Krennic, you get to kind of play this soft control strategy and go ahead and play units along the curve and get a little bit of extra value for trading out. With all that said, in her linear strategy of controlling the board, getting the heal in, and allowing you to survive to late game is a decent and pretty strong strategy. I'm actually going to put her at the top of B tier for the moment. This is actually one of those decks that I am still not a very big believer of, Double Blue Iden. However, it did perform extremely well in the planetary qualifier, actually taking down an entire planetary qualifier on its own. And so this one I might have to revise going forward. Iden specifically, not that Iden has Iden Green backing her up or multiple different variations for her, but as a leader, in terms of just how powerful that heal can be and what aspects she has associated with her, that combination of things can actually just make her the de facto control leader potentially going forward in the future sets. So she might be jumping up into the A tier, but I will reserve my judgment for a little bit later on, potentially in this video or potentially in the future. And it is official, guys. It is official with Chewbacca. I just do not like this leader. It just doesn't do too much. The Sentinel on anything that's played turn 1 or turn 2 doesn't really do a whole lot, because generally speaking, you're trying to trade off anyways. The 7 to flip 2/9 Sentinel is pretty weak, especially with Rivals Fall in the meta now, or just a bunch of things that can just straight up kill it in one shot. I am actually going to be putting Chewbacca down into D tier. This is a leader that I do not think anyone should really be playing. I think that even Finn is better, simply because he comes down on 5 resources as a 4/6. That is just a better combination and will allow you to win more games. Straight up, just that alone ends up giving you a huge advantage over the Chewie players. Now, there is one specific thing, not saying that it's good, but it's something that I've always wanted to do for a video. Not that I haven't played it already, but that is the Wookiee tribal deck with Chewbacca as your leader. You could do some really fun things with that. Not saying that it's good, again, but it is something that's fun. I just don't think you could really get a whole lot of value out of Chewbacca, especially as of late, where the games seem to either you go real late and you're getting absolutely dominated with pure value, and in that case, Chewbacca's a 2-9, which is super weak, or you're just getting rushed down and Chewbacca's a 7 to flip. That's not really going to be relevant at any point in the game. Next up, we've got Chirrut, and this is one of those leaders that has really fallen off because the main reason we were using him was for the Force package, the Force synergy. He's a 5 resource, 3/5, which is a pretty terrible stat line, actually. And I haven't really specifically mentioned this, but if you compare this to like Han Solo, which is one of those amazing leaders, right? He's an S tier, but oftentimes I'll say new Han, he's got an okay, kind of below average stat line that I'm not excited about. Chirrut's is even worse at 3/5. The big thing that was going for him was that he doesn't get defeated with damage-based removal or damage-based combat damage or whatever. When he comes down, he could still be takedown though, which is kind of awkward for a leader, right? Sabine can be takedown, but she comes down a whole turn sooner than Chirrut. Chirrut can be Rival's Fall, which is really obnoxious. There's other Force cards in the sets now that you can synergize with, and heck, a better option in the exact same aspect combinations with the exact same plan came along with set 2, and that is Rey. So I'm actually going to be putting Chirrut, and this kind of pains me a little bit, down into the C tier. Actually, you know what? You could even argue that he's in D tier because there's no reason to be using Chirrut. Even though he comes down a turn sooner, it just doesn't do enough to make up the things you're losing with Rey. But it's something that I don't think, if you're going to be playing Chirrut, you're like never going to win like I do with Hunter and Chewbacca. You might notice that there's 7 resource leaders down there. Not that all of them are that bad, but something to consider. Chirrut does come down early, does have the Force tag and the Rebel tag, which can do some nice things. It's just that with Rey, the Restore 3, the ability to put experience tokens to make all your units earlier, stronger, and the ability to give just so much value when she comes down in the fact that she becomes a 3/7 and will heal you over multiple turns, makes Chirrut kind of a little bit of a chump. Now, the other Vigilance Heroism leader in Luke Skywalker is a lot different than Chirrut and Rey. Generally speaking, you're not playing Luke in the Force Synergy Red Aggression Vigilance deck like Rey or Chirrut, which gives them a little bit of room to kind of grow out of their shadows. Oftentimes, you're playing Luke as this mid-range value pile where you get down your Alliance Dispatcher and are able to keep him alive. So you can play things a little bit of ahead of curve. You're ramping a little bit, getting to this leader, getting shield tokens down, getting some value there. Overall, he kind of acts as a mid-range deck, and it's pretty powerful. It's not amazing, but it is pretty powerful. And I definitely wouldn't consider it like an A tier or S tier list where you're going to be putting some competitive reps into him. But his shield token is pretty nice if you're able to play things ahead of curve with that resupply. Any unit that you're playing basically on curve with your opponent now has a shield token is pretty obnoxious to deal with. And if you do get that Obi-Wan plus Luke constant piling on of shields, it can be a lot more powerful. However, with a lot more removal, with Fell the Dragon, with Rival's Fall, with Takedown, with all these things, shield tokens do end up a little bit worse. And those cards are very, very frequently played. I'm gonna have to put Luke in the B tier, middle of the pack, solid leader, but not amazing. Now we're going to talk about the most expensive leader in the entire game in Emperor Palpatine. Now I know I've spoken a lot about these high to flip leaders and how you really need a very powerful ability. Jabba does have a very powerful ability. Hunter and Chewbacca really do not. It's one of the reasons why they're so weak. But Emperor Palpatine, the ability to steal an opponent's unit, straight up steal it, is immensely strong. And that is the reason why Emperor Palpatine is the go-to ramp deck, because you have a payoff in your leader slot where you always have a guaranteed option of deploying him. And that's really, really strong. Add to the fact that you just randomly can play a little bit of synergy with the defeat something, get a damage on something. You end up with a really, really powerful combination. You also have command villainy, which are a powerful aspect combination. We've seen Palp yellow, Palp green, Palp blue. He's been a really big staple, and I'll have to drop him into the A tier just above Bossk. Generally speaking, Emperor Palpatine is the go-to ramp deck, and this is the deck that you're really looking for if you're trying to play some big, big things, and he does a really nice job of it. Next up, we've got Tarkin. Now, Tarkin is a leader that I would not have expected to get a lot better with Set 2, and I would have put him in like the B tier category, but he did get a lot better with Set 2, and the reason for that is, unlike Chirrut or Rey, specifically Chirrut, where you're trying to play the Voltron strategy. For those of you that don't know, Voltron, you're basically just putting a bunch of things on one thing and you're attacking with it to make it kind of unkillable. Tarkin is actually able to do it better than any other list, and that's because of a specific card, TIE Phantom, being added to the pool. Now, some decks can just play TIE Phantom as a value piece and it ends up being amazing, and Tarkin can do that as well. But the fact that you could put an experience token on something for one resource, hey, where have we seen that with Rey? Oh yeah, pretty good ability, is extremely strong. He also comes down on 5 resources, gives you extra value, builds out your board a little bit more, and he's in a really powerful aspect combination. I'm gonna have to put him at the kind of bottom of A tier, a little bit above Cad Bane. I would actually say, that one's a little bit tricky. I think they're pretty comparable, but a pretty strong leader and does some really nice work overall across the whole game. What's that? What's that? D tier's knocking again? That's right. Hera's jumping into D tier. Now, this is someone that, again, I am hoping and have been hoping that she will become a leader that I'm excited about playing. But I actually don't know if that's going to be the case, because her whole identity revolves around not paying these aspect penalties for specific cards, Spectre cards, that aren't really being printed all that often. And not only aren't printed all that often, but most of them aren't even that powerful that you're playing outside of her deck, or you would play outside of her deck. The only one that's been consistently played, or the 2 that have been consistently played, are, I guess there's 3, Ezra, Sabine, and the other one being Kanan. Now, Sabine in particular has been really, really awesome, and Ezra has been decent in specific decks, and then Kanan has been decent in specific decks. You can also include Spark of Rebellion in that kind of category, but this mismatch of options really ends up being pretty weak, and you have to wait for additional Spectre cards. And not only that, but also, when you have more sets added on, the ability to cheat this aspect penalty gets weaker. Reason being is because you have so many different options that you no longer need to expand your radius outside of whatever aspects you are. With set 1, if we had a lot of strong Spectres, I actually think Hera would be the best situated because you had so many limited options. But now with more and more options, I think she's actually going to get weaker unless there's a huge surge of Spectre cards. Next deck is the very first deck that I actually, or next leader I should say, is the very first leader that I made a deck tech on, and that is Leia. She has been pretty solid. The ability to cheat actions has and always will be, at least in my opinion, a strong thing to do in Star Wars Unlimited. The tricky part about her is she is very limited in which cards are able to cheat actions in Rebel units. Her 5 to flip 4/6 attacking body is pretty nice. Her ability to cheat actions is pretty nice. There are really 2 things that are holding her back. One, as I mentioned, Rebel units. The second thing is the aspect she's in. We talked about this with Boba Fett, new Boba Fett. We talked about this with Hunter. We talked about this, well, not really, but also applies to Hera. Guess what? Leia, in command heroism, wants to be an aggro deck. There are better options, and she ends up getting harmed because of that. Regardless, she is one of the better options to play with the aggro shell, very similar to Boba Fett. It's just a matter of, are we ever going to get more Rebel units? And if we are, is she going to get a lot better? Probably, and we will have to see. Into the B tier she goes. Next up, we've got Darth Vader. Now, Darth Vader is a little bit crazy. He's a 7-cost leader, or 7 to flip leader, and has a really powerful on attack trigger. But there's also another thing to note about him is he's a 7-cost leader, and he doesn't do anything when he immediately comes down. You must attack with him. His frontside action costs you a resource, but you need to have played another card, another villainy card alongside Darth Vader in order to actually get that value. Unfortunately for Darth Vader, all of those things actually count pretty good against him. And he's actually dropped quite a bit in my perception over the course of time. Very powerful leader from set 1, just the pure value of Vader ended up doing a lot of work. But there's a lot of hard control variants, a lot of ramp variants that are really good, and Darth Vader isn't really amongst them. Not that he's terrible, but his whole gimmick is that he is a powerful leader in of himself, powerful unit. He's not really giving you anything to be a leader. Like, he's not doing anything special or anything like that on the front side. He comes down late and he's not doing something immediately. You need to have him on the board and keep him around for a couple of turns in order to actually see that effectiveness from Vader. And that just doesn't happen all that often. And so for me, he's going to end up in the B tier, a little bit higher on the end of B tier, but still B tier leader. Next up, we've got Grand Inquisitor. This is a leader that has been extremely fun and has a really powerful ability, but still lacks a little bit because of the action economy in Star Wars Unlimited. I've said this a couple times with Jabba. I've said it with Leia in terms of how powerful action cheating is and whether or not it's a strength or weakness. And Grand Inquisitor also suffers from that. It's very predictable to see when Grand Inquisitor is going to do his thing, and you really can't combo off with Grand Inquisitor. And so the best way I've seen with Grand Inquisitor is just to get some value, dealing damage to ready something up. Playing it as a hyper aggressive deck or getting value off of dealing that damage is what your goal should be. And you can do some nice things, especially with Grand Inquisitor Blue. I've seen some Grand Inquisitor Yellows, but I think Blue is a little bit more consistent, a little bit stronger. And as such, I will definitely be putting him into the B tier. His ability is powerful. The one thing that's really holding him back for me is the fact that he's a 6 flip 3/6. Okay, we talked about how weak that body for New Han is. Or average to okay, a 5 flip 3/6 is. We then talked about how kind of weak a 5 to flip 3/5 is. Grand Inquisitor is worse than both of them. He's one more cost and still has that 3/6 body. Not quite as weak as Chirrut, but he comes down a turn later. And unfortunately for Grand Inquisitor, that is just way too little stats in order to actually get some sort of effectiveness done, especially considering on turn 4, people are playing 6/6 naturally and can just attack into your Grand Inquisitor and one-shot it without any additional help. It really is weak. So we're going to put him in the B tier and probably around the Kylo Ren level, but I think a little bit more consistent than Kylo, so bottom of B tier here. All right, everyone, IG88 coming in, and my goodness, this is a leader that his whole purpose is go wide, I come down early, and I have a decent amount of stat points, and I can get in some damage, right? He just doesn't do anything. His stat line is extremely weak. His 4 toughness is extremely weak, just like Fennec is. His ability of playing a bunch of units in order for you to get that 1 extra damage in for a specific unit ends up doing really badly in the meta. There are just so many things that deal 1 damage, which is enough to take out a lot of the commonly played IG units. But also, because basically every deck is playing something on turn 1, you are forced to play multiple things in order to actually get that action to be triggered from IG. And if you're doing that, that means that your opponent's probably playing a higher statted unit and can probably kill your unit while keeping their unit around, which prevents you from using that 1 resource action or the 1 extra damage action from IG's front side ability. Come set 3, I don't think this is going to get a lot better. It might, but I just don't find any use for IG. I actually find him to be a D tier leader. I really have been super unimpressed. If you're trying to play an aggression villainy leader, aggression villainy, I think Bossk is better. Grand Inquisitor's better. I think Kylo Ren fits that mark better. If you're trying to rush people down, Kylo Ren's better on that. If you're trying to do some value plays, or you're trying to get into the late game with like IG green, Bossk is better at that. If you're trying to rush people down, but with more value units, unlike Kylo or Bossk, you have Grand Inquisitor Blue. He just does not fit in any circumstance and dies super easily. Next up, we got to talk about a leader that draws you cards, but doesn't actually require you to go through a bunch of hoops for 1 resource, and it's still not even that great in Cassian Andor. So this one's interesting. Again, it suffers a lot from being in heroic aggression, and you have just so many other aggro options that are way, way better. But 4/6 flip on 6, pretty weak, one of the weaker stat lines, a little bit of below average, which is something unfortunate. The ability to draw additional cards doesn't really benefit you all that much in Star Wars Unlimited overall. And especially so when you're trying to play a more aggressive deck. If you're trying to go to the late game, well, guess what? Cassian's not going to be doing you all that many favors and will probably prevent you from getting to the late game because you don't have anything to back you up. All of those things to say, I do think he's okay. Like, you can play him if you want to get something a little bit of a different flavor of aggro where you're getting a lot of options in your deck. I would have to put him in the C tier category, slightly above Fennec, but slightly below Lando. I've just been really unimpressed with Cassian overall. Next up, we got to talk about some good leaders, okay? And these next ones are going to be pretty good. Starting us off with Sabine, the second S tier of the whole list, by far better than, well, I should say by far, slightly better than New Han in terms of performance and overall viability. We've seen double red Sabines, we've seen Sabine greens, we've seen Sabine yellows. In fact, again, Sabine green, Sabine yellow also took spots at planetary qualifier. It also performed better than New Han, but it's also just been the staple aggro list. And you might notice we have two aggression heroism leaders in S tier. It's one of the reasons why all these heroism command and heroism aggression leaders do struggle a lot, because you have so many different options that are better than them in New Han and in Sabine. But Sabine's case is a little bit different in that she's one of the cheapest to deploy leaders, or tied for the cheapest to deploy leader with things like Lando, for example, but does a lot of damage, guarantees you damage on the front side, and allows you to play Energy Conversion Lab alongside her standard Rebel aggro package. Put all that together, and suddenly you have one of the most powerful aggro leaders in the game. And that just makes it extremely tough to deal with. And she will consistently be good because of her guaranteed damage on the front side, her early flip cost, her guaranteed damage on the attack share to the base, and just gives you so many different options. Definite S tier for me. And next up, we've got the biggest boogeyman of Star Wars Unlimited, and that is Boba Fett. And he's going to be going up into the S tier at the number 1 spot. To give you an idea of how powerful Boba Fett is, in the planetary qualifier, we had every single deck variation of Boba Fett in there. A Boba Red ended up taking a top 8 spot. A Boba Blue ended up taking a top 8 spot. Boba Yellow took multiple top 8 spots. And Boba Green took by far a vast majority of top 8 spots and claimed multiple wins alongside Boba Yellow, who also claimed a win in the planetary qualifier. Boba Fett is the leader to beat. And the main reason for it is how powerful the leader is. It's a leader tier list. He's the best leader in the game. I wonder why the decks are doing well. It's because of Boba Fett. There's two main reasons for it. The first one being he's a 5 to flip 4/7. If you look across the board here, what are 5 cost leaders? Oh, Qira's a 0/8, but ends up being a 4/4 when she flips. Bossk is a 4/6. Krennic is a 2/7. Tarkin's a 2/7. What's another one? Oh, we've got Leia. She's a 3/6. We got Chirrut. He's a 3/5, right? Boba Fett has the same stat line as what your average 6 cost leader has. But new Boba Fett's a 4/7. Luke's a 4/7. You've got Bo-Katan, who's a 4/7, Gar Saxon, who's a 4/7, all at 6 resources, but he comes down a turn earlier. The second thing being his ability to ready additional resources in the early game, and then when he flips to ready multiple resources to allow you to play multiple plays in a single turn, absolutely dominates the board and prevents your opponent from really coming back. It puts the final nail in the coffin when you flip him, and you're able to play 2 different powerful events or powerful units in the same turn. He is the strongest leader by a large margin. And we move on from those two to a pretty weak one in Thrawn. And I'm going to be dropping this guy kind of in the same category as Dr. Aphra. I really wanted Thrawn to be pretty good, but this front side action of paying a resource to exhaust an enemy unit just is not good enough. You're putting yourself a resource down for a little bit of a tempo advantage, but that resource down matters a ton. You can't really be playing a resource behind most of the time on a control deck. And if you're not playing a control deck, well, this one resource down when you're trying to tempo out your opponent also ends up being pretty weak. Not to mention he's a 3/9 body with 6 resources. But the biggest reason for it all is there's not a way to come back in the game frequently. And what I mean by that is if there's a way you can exhaust units and then by the time you hit turn 5, you cleared them all off the board, like with an evacuate, for example, maybe you'd have something going there. But unfortunately, evacuate just ends up being really weak, and super laser blast is too late in the game for Thrawn to actually perform as well as you're hoping for. So he's going to end up in the C tier. And then we transition into one of the better leaders in the game in OG Han. Now this one's a tricky one because it did do very well in the planetary qualifiers. In fact, a little bit worse into overall top 8 spots than Qira, but overall better in terms of placements compared to Qira. And he is a leader that I would consider just generically powerful. And if you put him in as your leader for many archetypes or many decks, you're actually going to do some major work. I'm actually going to drop him in the S tier. Now, this one is very debatable. I don't think people will debate whether or not Boba Fett, Sabine Wren, and New Han are the strongest leaders in the game. But I think OG Han has a little bit of conversation there. I think you could put him into A tier. But I want to drop him in S tier because I do think he is quality for S tier, but at the lower end. His ability to give you an extra resource with the cost of it essentially discarding a card from your hand is nuts. Playing a resource ahead, we talked about how important playing a resource down is. Playing a resource ahead is absolutely absurd. Not to mention you have the whole Han Solo flip turn where you can put a resource down, get Han Solo down in a turn earlier, and he ends up being a 5 resource 4/6, which is kind of a little bit misleading because 6 resource 4/6 is not really that strong, but a 5 resource 4/6 is pretty reasonable. In fact, a little bit above average, and that's what Han Solo ends up being because you can put that extra resource down to deploy Han, and then you can get down Han, play a 7 resource play on that turn. And you also have the Tech DJ combination, which we see a lot, not just in Double Yellow Han, but Han Green. We saw Double Yellow Han and Han Green in the planetary qualifier, so it has a variation, multiple variations of Han Solo that we're seeing. Very, very competitive spots. So very strong leader and a very powerful deck. Overall, S tier. Next up, we've got Jyn Erso. Jyn Erso. Okay, D tier, guys. D tier. I'm not even going to waste your time on this one. I was actually pretty hopeful for Jyn, and I think last time I did this video or talked about Jyn, I was like, you know, her overall deck is like a C tier, but I think the leader in of itself is just super poor. 6 to flip 4/7, not terrible. The problem is that her whole design revolves around you hitting your opponent, okay, and getting value trades in. But the whole design of Cunning is for you to get short-term advantage for long-term loss. And with this plan of attacking your opponent's units, guess what? You're going for the long-term value game plan, which is not what Cunning's trying to do. Add to the fact that 90% of the time, you're not even going to get a reasonable high-value trade with the front side action. And on top of that, you need to be in the position where you can actually attack your opponent's units and you have the initiative. So half the time, you might just not even have that option. The other half of the time, you have that option, but it's not going to give you an actual valuable trade in because you're playing the specific archetype that doesn't really reinforce that power. Even if we were playing a different aspect combination, the idea of trying to attack with units to get extra game plan or extra value in your game plan doesn't actually work out for the vast majority of decks. She's going to be a D tier leader. I would just not play her ever. Then we dive into the last two, and those are the starter decks for set 2 in Moff Gideon. First up, Moff Gideon, 5 resource to flip 3/6. This weird kind of synergy with low cost units on the front side, getting an extra power, just doesn't really do enough. There's some cool things you can do, like Super Laser Technician can suddenly be a 3-powered attacker, which can be nice. Some of your early units can be 3-4 powered attackers and other units, but that's the problem. It has to attack a unit. It can't attack a base. If it could attack a base, I would be a little bit more optimistic about it because you could get some extra damage in, flip him early, you know, suddenly you're getting overwhelmed and maybe you can make some value trades and get some damage to your opponent's base, but it just doesn't actually happen. And the fact that you must hit an opponent's unit means that you're kind of incentivized to play this more value-oriented deck, kind of the opposite of Jin, where instead of trading up and you keep your unit and you take out a unit that might be equivalent strength, you're looking at playing weaker units that give you value when they die or when they are played, but then you trade up with the Moff Gideon ability. And yet by doing so, you are entering the later game, and Moff Gideon doesn't really support a later game because your action doesn't do anything later on in the game, kind of similar to Jin. So for me, this guy has been really, really mediocre. Gonna have to put him in the C tier alongside Cassians and Landos and all that stuff. And lastly, we've got Mandalorian. This has been a pretty interesting one. I was really hopeful for him. I think if there was definitely a more aggro-focused meta than it even is now, like if it was pure aggro, Mandalorian can get a little bit better. But even if that was the case, the biggest problem with Mandalorian is that you both must play a unit, have it live, and then play an upgrade on it in order to even get any sort of effect. If this said when an upgrade enters play or when it enters the arena, you get to exhaust the unit, or you may exhaust the leader and then you can exhaust the unit with 4 less HP, I would be way more excited about Mandalorian, because then let's say you play Mandalorian, you play an L337, right? Suddenly you get a shield token. It's a 2/2 shielded for 2 resources. You get to exhaust something. Awesome. You play, I don't know, whatever other like Clan Ren Rescuer, you get an experience token. Boom, you get to exhaust something. That would be definitely B tier, maybe even A tier worthy. The fact of the matter is your opponent knows you want to play upgrades. So if they remove your units, your whole game plan is a lot weaker. On top of that, even if you're able to play your game plan, you're now playing upgrades on units, which can be easily dealt with one single removal option. And on top of all that, you have to draw the right combination of units plus upgrades in order to even do that plan in of its entirety. So there's a lot of things working against you, which ends up making it a C tier list. A little bit better than Fennec, Moff Gideon, that type of stuff, but still a little bit of a weak game plan overall. But that's going to wrap up the entire leader tier list. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, guys. I think the S tier, with the exception of Old Han, is pretty much just going to be everyone's S tier. You could maybe add Qira and some other lists in the S tier, but I don't think any of the three at the top 3 are ever coming out of the very best in terms of tier lists of anyone's tier list. Like I think those ones are pretty set in stone. It's when you start going into the A, B, C, and D tier options where you have some conversation. I think the A tier is the most interesting, but it's also something to mention that really we don't see all that much B, C, or D tier lists outside of the random store showdowns. Even in the A tier, it's a little bit rare. This meta is very much S tier for the most part in terms of competitive options. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.